started. Welcome to the podcast.
Kia ora.
Gregorian chat. Would you like to do your own introduction, Sean?
Hello, everybody.
Say it in Filipino. You know that one language.
Just me. In Philippines, you only have one language. Hello, I'm Shauna. Yeah, that's my introduction.
Hello, Shauna.
Welcome to the podcast. This is Gregorian chat, the podcast that always leaves you feeling great. I'm just making our headlines every week.
We have one. Isn't it Real Catholic Banter?
Well, yeah,
but get the realist
the
of Catholic
podcast,
banter.
that is Real Catholic Banter.
No, where you get the realist of Catholic Banter.
Oh, okay. Scrap that.
Realist.
Start again. Welcome to the podcast. This is Gregorian Chat, the podcast where you get that real fruity Catholic banter.
Oh yeah, the fruitiest of the realist Catholic Banter. Today we're joined by Jesus and the Hands of Saint Teresa of Lisieux. We also have Saint Rita, Anne, George, Francis, and Our Lady, and of course Saints Peter and Paul. So
the hands kind of remind me of something from Harry Potter. You know, like
really?
that'd be one of the things in Hogwarts, the floating hands or something.
The floating hands of Saint Therese. That's a band name.
The floating hands that fondle the roses. Copyright.
you can have it. You can have it. That's yours.
I'll take it.
No one else is taking it.
Getting hot in here. I think I'm going to roll my
Fondling
sleeves up.
And I think
So
it's just because of.
Fondling roses could just be a good name on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we pour some tea?
Yeah. It's been a while since we've had the Gregorian chat mugs on the podcast.
Mainly
They're back.
because
These are the new designs, guys.
No,
It's Dom and Dom.
Dom
and
and
nap
love?
time.
Dogs
and this
in
is
love.
Dom and Dom.
Because Dom, the Dominicans are the dogs of the Lord,
Oh yeah.
and God is love. So
It's like we're top and tailing dogs too. I don't know if the camera can,
I just
can get a
really
good
like
close up
this
on
one.
that.
Yeah, it's the nap time of the two Doms.
What about the other picture, sharing a bone?
yeah, well, isn't that what we do on the podcast on a regular basis?
Well, we have we chew the fat. That's probably a more accurate way of saying that. But
Yeah.
Well, the fat has been chewed, and that's why the bone is left.
Hey, but there's still
Oh,
more
it's milk
fat to be
everywhere.
chewed,
Oh,
and that's what
I
today's.
want milk.
This is a milky mess.
Yeah.
It's just a table that's a mess. It's okay. It's Shauna's It's Shauna's desk. I don't have to do it.
So this podcast, just in case you're thinking, all right, I've had enough of this useless stuff, and I'm just gonna
Just in case.
head off.
Probably not. Though, right?
Today's podcast is entitled "How to Stay Motivated."
How to stay motivated.
Right? Because
With
that's
an
something
8.
that
With an 8. Yeah.
motivated. Yes.
Yes.
Let's do it.
And just in case you're wondering, I have brought my stool sample.
That's like a lot.
This is
of
my
a lighter
case.
brown than I expected you'd go for. I thought you were into dark browns.
Well, I am white, so it's brown. Less brown.
No, that's the first time.
This is
Yeah,
the perfect
I'm
time
owning
to
it now.
just,
I'm
to
owning it
just
now.
move right on. And,
So,
and yeah.
so Dom, I've got a question for you.
Okay. Hopefully I can answer.
How do you stay motivated?
How do I stay motivated
Yeah.
with an 8? It's been a process, I must say. My wife is great at being
Wow.
motivated.
She's a bit of a winner.
The other morning I woke up, it's kind of like, it's just one of those days where you're not feeling particularly about anything. And she was super motivated, just about life and about making a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan.
Shit.
And she was talking to me about that yesterday.
Yeah.
About the plans?
Yeah, and I'm like, this sounds great.
Yeah.
I could probably do it another day. Like, it was just,
Yeah.
sometimes you're not always feeling the motivation.
Yeah.
And so, in a sense, but it really got my mind thinking about how, this motivation is a big thing for people.
Yeah.
And I guess in a way, there's like we kind of see motivation as like, what would I say, an added extra. Kind of like motivated people are just a certain kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking about it now. I'm kind of thinking, well, the opposite of motivation, like the complete opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like having absolutely no motivation for anything whatsoever is basically depression. It's like helplessness with no motivation whatsoever. You may disagree with that, but it just got me thinking. Some degree of motivation is surely a necessary thing for every person.
Well, I think there's natural motivation, which is for natural things like food, reproducing. So there's a motivation to find a partner, to have something to eat, to have a shelter to protect your children, to get a job, to provide for your family. So there's that natural motivation, which you don't really need to think about because it thinks about it for you. It's like, I'm hungry, now I'm motivated for food.
Right.
But then you mentioned depression, and that gets into a whole hairy issue where people don't feel motivated to get out of bed and to do stuff like that. But like, so there is, I think there's that more natural motivation where you're dealing with natural things, like, you know, even socializing, making friends,
Right.
and communicating, and so like learning a language. You know, if you're in a foreign country, there is you know, learning the language. You're motivated to do that so that you can actually survive.
There could be some barriers to that, though. I'm thinking about, like, socializing, for example. Like, yeah, I would maybe, sometimes I'd love to make friends and all that, but then there's fears that stop you from being motivated to push through, like, but fear of, like, rejection, for example, or, do you know what I mean? So, the food thing's probably a good example. Well, yeah.
Well, I don't get scared, so...
Throw it out there.
But I'm saying, yeah.
Throw it out.
So, I don't know. Yeah, that's...
Well, no, I think, like, on a very basic level, I think, you know,
Yeah.
as we're becoming, like, more of a developed society, we have the luxury of being able to worry about other things, like, what if people think I smell, or whatever like that. Like, you know, there was one time when no one had a shower, right?
Yeah, and that's how cologne was invented. Cologne was invented.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so I think there is that natural side of it, but I think that's not what we're going to be talking about in this podcast, because I know for
taking it there.
For one, I don't need to know about motivation to get food, because I'm not that bad.
Well, then what arenas of motivation are we talking about?
I'm thinking about, you know, self-development. You know, those things that you always want to get done, but you never get done because it's an optional extra.
Right.
It's like your creative pursuits. And I think that's where the rejection thing comes in a lot. Well, for me anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I have thoughts about this. I also read books
Open
about
the
this.
Please
floodgates.
share the thoughts in the books.
The one thought is that, like, it doesn't actually have to be the optional extras and stuff. I get what you mean. But I read this book called, it's not The War of Art. You know how there's a book called The Art of War?
I've heard of that, yeah.
This dude couldn't probably he wasn't motivated enough to think of another title. Just kidding. But it's The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield or something, and he talks about when people want to improve their lives in some way, there's like a level of resistance that like pushes back on them. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, if you read it, kind of be wary of I don't know. I don't think it's like New Age or whatever, but like it's kind of vague. But like I know, like for us as Catholics, like of course there's like resistance, and I think of it as like, you know, the other guy. You know what I mean? But like whenever you want to Voldemort, he who must not be named. But every time you want to do something, like, you're gonna be hit back with, you know, the opposite force or whatever.
Yeah. Resistance.
Yeah, resistance. And reading that, like, especially with music, for example, that's stuff that I really want to do, but it's usually the things that I want to do the most, or the things that I see are gonna be, like, really beneficial for my life or other people's lives, that it's the hardest to motivate myself to do. Because, I don't know.
So you feel like the biggest battle that we fight in motivation is against other people or ourselves?
All of the above sometimes. Like, well, I mean, maybe mostly, for me, it's mostly myself. It's like, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, fear of all these things.
It's also like, you know, it's not necessarily other people, but what you think other people will say.
Yeah.
So it's like, in that sense, it's other people. It's like, oh, if I do that, then they'll say this, and then that make this bad. And because I'm like that with music. I'm like, I know, in the past, I've you know, sung badly in front of a few people, and they've reminded me of that, and I'm like, well, now every time I sing in front of them, they're going to remind me of that, which they don't, but in my head they do.
Yeah.
So it's like, so now I can't sing in front of them ever again. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. And they think so, and I think so, and we've talked about it, and it's a very healthy conversation. But I think I think, you know, like, we have those things that we put in ourselves, and I think, you know, sometimes. Because one of the things that's really helpful for me in motivation is having somebody to do it, like whatever venture with, and they don't need to be involved in it. Like Shana's my soundboard for pretty much everything.
Likewise.
Yeah. So like, you know, writing a Bible study, to do my photography stuff, to like even podcasting.
Right.
Coming up with ideas and how to get through things. It's like having someone to go through that with makes it worthwhile for me. And one of the reasons I don't excel in music so much is I have no interest in learning music, but I have lots of interest in playing music with people. So if it's just me, I would never be a solo artist, because it's like, why would I sit at home and play guitar for hours on my own? That sounds like the worst thing in the world to me.
Because you're a social butterfly.
Because I am a butterfly, and I'm social.
So there's an element of, I guess, what motivates you is in a social context. But even to bigger question is like, motivated for what end? Like, is this betterment of life, or is it the betterment of others' lives? Is it more just for challenging yourself creatively? You know what I'm saying? For making life more enjoyable, or is it for making your life more good? I mean, and oftentimes I think we can say those things go together.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's good to be healthy. It's good to have a good diet because your body overall is better, your mind is working better, and in the same sense, being motivated for the right thing is very healthy.
Yeah.
I was just thinking recently, motivation is something I really take for granted, and or even just my need for motivation comes from the fact that I just take day-to-day stuff for granted. Like, I think, example, I thought the other day someone was like, "How old is your niece?" And I'm like, somewhere between 1 and 6 months. Like, I honestly couldn't tell you when or what month she was born in. I just can't remember. I just don't log that stuff away. And to some degree, I'm like, that's just the person I am. But another part of me thinks, you know what, like maybe it's just that I'm not mindful enough on a daily basis. I'm not just talking about like that kind of Buddhist mindfulness mentality. I'm talking about like being reflective about what your life is doing. Because I guess being... Once you get into a job, like a new job, and you're kind of like, as a teacher, you know, you kind of get used to it, and you're like, cool, the wheels are moving, the cogs are running. I'm able to just kind of start going through life now, but you stop thinking about it so much necessarily, having the time to just...
Yeah, you get into like a routine, and it's like more muscle memory.
Right, and I think that's kind of a stagnant place for motivation.
Definitely.
In a sense, because it's kind of like, oh, well, like, I'll achieve what I achieve in that point of time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's an okay place to be in, like to not put so much pressure on yourself. But I think if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, I'm looking for that stuff they're going to say about how do I get more motivated, I'd say my first step would be like, be more mindful in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think, you know, we've created, you know, for purpose. And like when we get into like, you know, just into a routine, there is no purpose. There's just completion. Oh, it's 3 o'clock, everybody. Anyway,
I think I just saw the hands move.
Go Therese.
Fondling them roses.
So once we get into a routine, like purpose goes out the window, and it just becomes like meeting goals. And like maybe not even goals that you're setting yourself. And I think, you know, this is the importance of, and I'm a massive advocate of like not just having a hobby, but having a hobby that you're intentional about, that you want. So my hobby is watching Netflix. It's like, that's not a hobby. That's something that happens when you're not doing anything else. It's more of an accident, yeah. And so I think, you know, a hobby is like, okay, I'm going to learn, so like podcasting. I'm going to do podcasting. I'm going to research topics. I'm going to learn how to use a camera, how to record audio, how to pull it all together, and then I'm going to post it. And then you've got that, you know, online accountability, which is really helpful. But yeah, I think, you know, that's like taking you outside of your routine and creating something new. It's like it's living a fuller life. And I think, you know, especially as Catholics, we're called to live this full life where we're not created to just work. We're not created to just raise children or just play. We're created to be present and to, like as you were saying, live a purpose-driven life.
Absolutely.
I guess when you say routine, maybe it's like going through the motions. Because I don't think routine is necessarily bad. I think like routine is like super good. But like when maybe what you said, Dom, about like going through the motions and just like not actually knowing, kind of just reacting as opposed to and I totally like get that. Like I've just come back from the States, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I had the best time over the States because that was all I was thinking about, just like living day to day. And then I came back and like everything's just flooding in, and that's when I realized like I'd probably been living a lot of this year just reacting to things, as opposed to being intentional. Like, intentionality is like come up a lot, but like so I sort of took some time and space and I'm taking some time and space this end of the year to just really think about. I think in terms of motivation, my first thing is like why do I do these things? Are they actually, like what is their purpose? And once I've figured out like what are these things that I want to like keep going with, then I can kind of carve out time for them and being intentional with that time. So like I think I was listening to a podcast this morning about intentionality, about they're talking about first fruits, like giving God your first fruits. And being intentional about, okay, say if you want to stay motivated with prayer, it's like I'm going to be intentional about my time with God. So I'm going to build my day around my prayer. So like there's this time I'm not going to budge. You know, like if someone's asking me, hey, let's go for lunch or something, I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do these times. And once you know what your why is, then when it is hard, you're like, oh, why am I doing this again?
Exactly.
It kind of pushes you and kicks you like
a
little bit.
So if we distill this down, so far we've got how do I stay motivated? Be aware or mindful. Be intentional. Or like purposeful. And what can we say about the third one?
Having a routine.
And
having a routine.
Be structured.
You know, because I think the routine is really good because routine's good when you're tired. You can turn into that like zombie mode and just like, okay, I can just go through the paces and it'll still get done. And then the next day you won't be like, oh, I didn't do anything yesterday. So like it's helpful for when you're in zombie mode a bit. You know, you've had a full day at work and it's like I can still get something done.
And motivation can act as its own reward and its own fuel as well. Like from a few experiences of my own, like even just trying to eat healthy. Having eaten already for 3 days healthy is like more of a motivator to eat healthy than sometimes than the actual I'm eating healthy for my body.
And I think also like with routine, especially with diet's a perfect one. It's about changing your life. So like, okay, I'm going to form my life around this goal of podcasting, eating healthy, whatever it is. So then all of a sudden your culture changes as a person, and the way to that is routine.
I think also like maybe starting small as well. Like for me, what stops me from being motivated to do things is like when I get overwhelmed and I'm like, say for example, like a diet, say oh my gosh, I can't like just eat grass for just I don't know. That's what you guys eat for a diet, right? But I'm like I could like vegetarian you know what I'm saying?
So so I decided to lose a bit of weight. I know dieting helps, so I decided to go vegetarian three days a week.
And then yesterday,
this is actually a true story that
this is actually what I'm doing right now.
Yesterday we had like really awesome.
The important thing is that it was vegetarian.
It was vegetarian.
The important thing is that no, it was the burger.
So good.
Really?
But it was like this big like.
The important thing
is
that
it was
unhealthy. So it kind of defeated the purpose, but it kept on the vegetarian buzz.
No, and I think I agree, and that's but
the
goal is to be vegetarian.
Well, but also,
not healthy.
Well, no, the goal is to be healthy. the routine is vegetarian. I mentioned this to a friend, and he was like, well, you want to give up sugar, you want to give up this, you want to give that. I was like, I'm just going to do...
Why don't you faff off?
I'm just going to do vegetarian 3 days a week.
One thing at a time.
And then once I got that down, maybe I'll think about lowering the sugar, content. Because I also had a whole can of Coke with that thing.
That's a good day. It was like really great. It was so good.
Yes,
shout out Burgery.
But this reminds me of like something Terry Crews said. He's like talking about getting fit and in shape. He says, what's important is the routine. It's like, one day you don't feel like working out. Just go to the gym. Walk around the gym and get out. And then it's like, then you've been to the gym. You've got the routine going.
Exactly.
So I think
eventually you get to the point where you're like, I actually want to start working out now.
This is an expensive walking around room.
It's got
$12 a week and I'm just visiting. Just go there, take a shower.
But so be
intentional,
be mindful, be intentional, be structured. Be structured, and what was that last
Start small.
Just check the beginning of the podcast when he said so.
something. Anyway,
so I hope you remember what we said, because we obviously don't. But I think we can all work together to get our motivations in
definitely
motivation.
Motivate.
Eight.
Let's finish the song.
Motivate.
This song's called Motivation. This song's called Motivation.
This could be a radio station, but it's a podcast.
Conversation.
Broadcasting all over the nation.
With the stations, motivation.
Just want you to know that the camera is not rolling anymore because we ran out of time, but we got the audio, so we're gonna go home. This is the end of the show. Whoa!
Whoa! That was
bless.
a spoon drop, spoon drop.
Spoon drop. Spoon drop. I think that should be a thing.
Spoon drop.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the podcast. I've got good news. It just got a whole lot easier to search for us online.
All you gotta do is search Gregorian Chat into YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, and Player FM for those who are on Android.
Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. See you later. God bless.